Speak up, speak out. Let's talk about it. Welcome to the show where you can show your love, no doubt about it. Where self-love and self-worth are the topics of the day. Right here on the Just Blah Show, where love is the only way. And here are your hosts, Barb and Faye.
This is Barb.
And this is Faye, and welcome to Just Blah. Barb and I have been just kind of seeing different things, especially on the internet, how people are responding to each other. And I don't know if it's just people just kind of trying to reconnect again out in the community, but we thought we kind of touch upon, I guess, what you call the Karen experience, where you have interactions with someone who is definitely coming from a negative vibe, I would say, controlling, negative. I guess, like Bob was saying, it could be like a Debbie Downer, and I like the negative Nancy. I mean, I'm sure there's tons of names that you can come up with, but we thought we kind of talk about it because I think everyone has been on both sides of that equation. To say that you've never been negative towards someone and created an experience that wasn't a feel-good experience for someone else would be saying you're not human, right? I think we've all been there on both sides of the coin, but some people kind of stay on one side more than the other. Because I know for myself that I have said things or done things that have impacted other people in a negative way, and that could have came across as what you would call a Karen. And then, as you mature and learn how to respond.
Navigate.
Yeah, well, and respond instead of react to what's going on. Those tend to minimize over time, hopefully with maturity and self-understanding. But with that, if you can kind of maybe just go a little bit into what causes someone maybe to go into showing up that way, what people are calling Karens. I think that's the term being used today.
Right. And we have such a huge reaction, and that's what they're looking for. And you got to remember, we have to stop. And like for me, I get really curious when I see people who are disproportionate to the reaction to what's going on. It's like, what is that about? Well, I already know a lot about that person by the way they're reacting to the store clerk or somebody or their neighbor. It's just so out of hand. What does that mean? That means to me that that person has a lot of um, trauma, in the sense emotional trauma, meaning they're not heard. So the only way they know how to be heard is to be what I call an emotional bully, and to raise their voice and get louder, and they can even go into the physical parts of maybe shoving or getting right like 2 inches in your personal space to make a statement. And that is just somebody with a lot of trauma. Now, it's not your job to point that out to them. It's your job to go, oh, this person is not in a very good headspace or brain space, right? So their brain has been wired to react, like have that reactive knee-jerk reaction to get what they want, to be heard, seen, and seen. That may be accepted. They might try to force the acceptance of what they want on somebody, but it definitely does not leave that space of wanting to connect with that person. So I can imagine people like that are pretty darn lonely when they're sitting alone with themselves. And the way to connect with people, and the only way they know how to do that, is to be like attention seeking, angry people. So there are people who complain for attention seeking so they can get the validation of being part of the collective, or wherever that may be, work, family, wherever that might be. Then we also have those people who maybe don't react that way, but they're just chronic complainers. They're like, nothing is always, there's always something to be negative about, right? There's always a cloud over their head. And I enjoy clouds, don't get me wrong. I love rain and stuff. So, but it's the intention to get the attention of another. They're low key complaining, if that makes sense. Somebody who complains, it just like it's a slow drip. It's like every time you talk to them, they're going to complain about something, and it's just you either accept them or you just choose to disengage or maybe not connect with them so much. And then the other ones are just what I guess a lot of people call it narcissistic tendencies. It's like they just have a totally disregard to other people and don't care where it's at. And that can fall into the attention seeking. Of course, when we're in a high type of emotional state, whether it's the good, the bad, the pretty, the ugly, we're not thinking about anything about except for how we're experiencing it through our mind, body, spirit.
I see. I was just thinking, gosh, how do I deal with these people when I actually come across them? I tend to, I find myself like not shutting down, but kind of like really, instead of engaging at the same energy level, I tend to stabilize and not match that energy, because I see where it can go completely out of control, right? Especially if you have two people with this tendency, they kind of feed off of each other.
Right.
I mean, in the past, I would totally shut down and walk away from it and not be, because I didn't know how to deal with it, right? So the easiest thing to do with those type of people for me was to run. But now it's more kind of like, okay, the curiosity, you piqued my interest. This was not the response I was expecting, right?
Right.
So then you get into the, I guess, the emotional competence and maturity and knowing how to maybe disengage from the situation. And I don't know how, because really you can't control that person. Whatever
No.
that person's doing, you have no control over. I mean, I don't want to feed that energy by reacting to them in the sense of feeding them energies that gives them the momentum of whatever tangent they're going off on, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
so what I'm thinking is when you're talking about that is just some of my experiences because I've been, verbally attacked, from people. And before I would go like you, shut down mode, and I'd actually beat myself up because I was one of those people who internalized it. And then I started getting tools in hand. So one of the tools, because you don't want to be sucked into somebody's story about you. You don't want to be, I don't want to start owning it or even looking at it because that's not the truth of who I am. I actually know who I am. That's why we need not just believe who you are, but know who you are and stand in that foundation. One of the responses I was taught when somebody was coming at me, and it's not dismissive, but it's trying to honor them, but not making them wrong, but not also engaging. So I'd be like, oh, that's an interesting story of me. Thank you for sharing. And not saying it's snotty, because if you say it in a snarky way, of course, it's always in the tone and the intention. Or the other one might be, that's really interesting. That gives me something to think about. Thank you. So there is no like, and then if they keep going on, it's like, wow, that's so much information come in. I just need I'm going to just take that and just kind of digest it and get back to you if I want to get back to you, or just like, that's interesting. So something like that, that's going to help you move forward and not engage them or inflame them. And if they take it as, being dismissive, there's really nothing you can do about that. That's when you just do what's called a strategic withdrawal. You do it with grace and you do it with gratitude, and you don't make them wrong, but that's a whole nother subject we can talk about. So that's one way I think I would approach if it's me being personally attacked versus witnessing it from, in a store or on TV or something.
Yeah, I was just thinking about one time I had a run in with a gentleman. I was his manager, and he just wouldn't stop. I mean, I literally had to leave the building and let him know I need to take a walk and end this. And he was literally following me out the door because he just wouldn't let it go, right? And I wasn't asking him to let it go. I was just asking him to take a pause and let's, kind of regroup here, because he was very much reacting because he didn't really care for what he was hearing, but he was very much reacting. And so it made it very difficult to, I guess, engage with him because he wasn't, he was only interested in being heard.
Right.
Seen, meaning that he only wanted to talk. He didn't want to have dialogue. And I think that's kind of what those Karens are, right? It's kind of like, I am going to demand your time, and and I'm not gonna let you not pay attention to me, right?
Right,
Do it in any means necessary. I mean, that's
right.
kind of the mode, and that's kind of, extreme,
Yeah.
but it does happen, and you see it more and more. And I don't know, if it's just because people record more. Yeah, I don't know,
I
but
don't
yeah,
know. Yeah, it's
I
crazy.
haven't had one of those experiences in probably, I'm gonna say a good 10 years, right? Because
Yeah,
I mature and you learn from those experiences. Even that
right.
experience with that gentleman, I learned a lot from it, and I learned a lot about, okay, well, I kind of need to look at this, and then, maybe I need to approach things, trying different techniques, right? Uh,
Right.
but sometimes people just, their intent is to just make noise. And like you said, it's the emotional people that just don't give a crap about anybody.
Well,
And
I don't think that they don't give a crap. It's just that they don't have the
I
platform
mean, in the
or
moment,
and
yeah,
the practice
yeah,
to be emotionally, or maybe never been. I mean, their family dynamics might be that's how they communicate, so that's the
yeah,
only way they know how to do that. I don't know what the story is, and to assume it, but without talking to the person. But there are
yeah,
techniques we can do because we all go there. We all get angry, we shut down, we scream, we yell, we lie, we do all the defending and protecting. So one of the things before we make this too long is I just want to give a couple of steps. It's like,
sure,
okay, great. We all have a negative bias loop somewhere in us, and it does get triggered here and there. So when we start noticing that, a lot of people don't realize they're in that negative frame of mind, like they get super heated, like, go to the extreme and just throw things and stuff like that. If you can recognize it at a 1 or 2, then you can, instead of at the 10 where you're exploding, you can really make a difference in your approach to communicating your wants and needs without it becoming a huge, I guess, like war, right? Emotional war between a tug of war between who's right and wrong, and focusing on communicating for understanding and coming to a clear agreement between whoever is involved. So one of the techniques, and you probably all heard this before, is when you start feeling yourself getting upset. So one of the examples I was giving Faye was when I used to drive in traffic, I drive an hour to work, I would get very frustrated with drivers and everything. And I could feel myself tensing up. I could feel my shoulders tightening and short of breath. And I was just getting really tense. So by the time I got home, I was just not in the best place emotionally. And it would take me about a half hour to come down off of that um, tenseness. So I decided one day, and I don't know why, I mean, this is a technique and I probably knew about it in the back of my head, but never utilize it, was I decided, okay, I'm going to make my driving time my me time, meaning I'm going to listen to books that I want to listen to, and I'm going to listen to the music that I normally don't listen to, or I'm going to make those phone calls, of course, hands free, and talk to people. And then by the time I got out of the car, I felt, replenished, and I could move on to whatever my activity was. So of taking, 15 minutes or just shutting down and not doing anything else and really minimizing my joy because of my experience of the way I was reacting. So really understand how you're showing up, recognize it, and then make different choices to put in place to change that. And it takes tons and tons of practice, and it takes tons and tons of tenacity. The other big one is practicing gratitude. We hear this all the time, but it is proven that we can only, focus on one thing at a time. Everybody says they multitask. Yes, you can do a lot of things very quickly, but if you focus on gratitude, it's like when I'm driving in the car, I'm thankful to have car. I thank you to have gas in my car. And it sounds silly, but it starts helping you to look for the things that you're grateful for instead of looking for the things that aren't going well for you, like the person cutting you off, or maybe you're going 5 miles an hour on the freeway, or whatever it might be that might be setting you off. So how can you offset that? Is by focusing on what are you grateful for? So those are 2 steps that I can think of right off the top of my head, and just really not giving up on yourself, and to give yourself grace when you do, slip into, that pattern of um, of being negative. And I used to have a saying, I'm like, oops, there I am again, right? And I just kind of made it light so it didn't feel so heavy, and it kind of took the pressure off. And it's like, okay, What am I grateful for? And it almost felt silly at first, but now that's just kind of how I respond when I have what I go, oops, there I am again. Because I have my moments where I show up in my defensive and protective behaviors. I'm going to have that for the rest of my life. And that's just something I've accepted, which just makes life a little bit easier because like, yeah, it's going to happen, but I'm okay with it. I know I have the tools emotionally to handle it.
Yeah, and you also are aware that you are affected by those traits of yourself, right? And
Right.
that's who you are. So, and you have the tools to manage whatever the situation is that comes along. And I know you that even if you didn't have the tools, you know you have the capacity to know to reach out and ask for help, which is another big thing that could be another whole talk about asking for help.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think we'll end it there. And thanks for sharing. And it's been a good conversation. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And go find you, Joey, and have a wonderful day. And Barb,
Make each moment count because you do.
no, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.